Now we're going to get into the daily Q&A. This day's Q&A is, let's go through the list. Remember, you could always email me at charlie@charlieharary.com your questions. I'm going to try to get to as many as I can. I just I don't say do them randomly, but let's go to, okay. Dr. Steven, Dr. Steve, thank you for your question. Here it is. I was wondering if you could give me some tips on how to create a ritual on how to discipline my kids in a more compassionate way instead of knee-jerk reactions and making them feel bad. Awesome question. How to discipline our children. So let me give you a little bit of advice that I heard once that is, if you do it right, it works, and it's hard to implement. But it's critical. Kids need discipline. There's a huge sort of phenomenon now called helicopter parents. Helicopter parents are wonderfully intentioned people who think that the way to parent is to solve all of their kids' problems and never letting them do it on their own. They have no in the vocabulary. There's gradations to this. Usually helicopter parents create very soft, non-resilient kids. Kids need discipline. They need structure. Kids are fetch about school and finals and like it's so hard and it's so terrible. And then they finish their semester, they go into their house 2 days after waking up whenever they want to, they're like going out of their minds. We all need discipline. And the reason is because discipline is what takes our natural abilities and hones it to a specific purpose. Half of what we're doing on the show, on the broadcast, thank you. I got a great email yesterday from a wonderful woman who suggested we change it to broadcast. Thank you. Half of what we're doing here is trying to find more structure, because when you're an adult, you don't have structure unless you create structure. If a kid is not disciplined properly, they're not going to achieve their purpose, their potential. They're kids. They don't know how to discipline themselves, and they'll never learn how to discipline themselves if they weren't taught as a kid growing up. But here's the problem. Real discipline takes place through just laws, right? If you really think through what discipline is structure. Law is really just structure, right? Something that continues, that makes sense, that is just, that is beneficial. And if you allow oneself to be part of beneficial structure that doesn't change, whether you like it or you don't, now you have no choice but to step up to the structure. For example, making murder against the law is a great idea. It wasn't like that in every country always. There was a time where you could murder other people, and now you can't. Not based on color, race, gender, nobody. Having a society where you're not allowed to murder anybody is a great, just law that is totally impersonal to the people. And so if somebody is in a rage and wants to hurt somebody, they have to step up to the law. And when you have a society that has beneficial structure, it now moves all of its participants up to the structure. It doesn't descend like maybe going on a little bit. That's how your home should be. You should have rules that make sense. Whether they get it or not is irrelevant, but it makes sense to the people putting the rules into place. It's well thought out. It's not off the cuff. It's not in reaction. Sometimes parents make rules because they're tired. Just go to bed. Just go to bed. I don't know if it's the right bedtime. It's just we're tired. Sometimes parents discipline because they're frustrated. And they're frustrated with their own inabilities, or they're frustrated with the balancing of their lives, and their kids are just have to listen to them. So they discipline them, not because that's the right thing in the moment. It's because that's what you do when you have power. You get to say stuff and make them do stuff. because you can. Sometimes parents, myself included, all of us, say things to your children, not because that's the right thing to say, but because you can say those things. And they have no choice but to listen to you. And then we get into this world of this knee-jerk parenting where there really isn't a lot of structure in your house. There's kids going to school and going here and going there, but outside that, it's basically like whatever. And anytime something wrong happens, then there's like a guilt or some level of like repercussions for things that were wrong versus, wait, we're in charge of the home. Let me think about what I have to put in place to try to make sure that the kids do what they're supposed to do, regardless of whether or not they want to or they don't want to, they're in the mood, they're not in the mood, because there's these impersonal beneficial laws that are in my house that the kids will have to rise up to. So if there's a way, and you at first create positivity connected to that. So let's assume everyone's got to clean your room. If that's a rule in your house, that doesn't have to be enforced through fear. Now, as the kids get older, it's hard to go backwards. But cleaning one's room is just part of what we do as responsible people. And as a result, when you at first introduce it when they're little, they just grow up in it. If you have to introduce it later on, it's harder, but you introduce it with positivity, or at the very least you introduce it with a sense of, this is good for you and good for us. This makes sense. Your room should be cleaned. What ends up happening is they don't clean their room, and then one day a parent walks in and sees the place a pigsty and then goes off. And the kid's like, what? You didn't even make a big deal because it's dirty. They don't even have the muscles of what they're supposed to be doing built in. To be told what they're not supposed to be doing is like, what? Now, it's intuitive to mom. It's not intuitive to the 13-year-old boy. Mom thinks things should be clean. A 14-year-old teenager doesn't. A 14-year-old teenager, especially boy, thinks things shouldn't be clean. I don't know, like it's better not to make my bed. But the hard part about parenting is the implementation of rules. That makes sense. And allowing those rules to stick, whether the kids like them or not. Not because you can, but because that's what's best for the kids. And so when we have a proactive approach to parenting, when there's like a time where mom and dad, or mom/or dad, depending on if you're raising a kid with two parents in the house or one parent in the house, also depends on whether you're raising a kid who's 18 and 20 versus a kid who's 6 and 7, so it has to adapt. When there's some level of thought of what do we want our kids to do? What do we want them to this? And how do we want them to do this? And what should we be doing? What should we be modeling as what's going to be what our family does? That whole strategy of how do I place a structure in my home that's going to give my children the ability to grow, that's where the hard work comes in. Implementing rules and enforcing rules really come after that work. So if you find yourself always responding to the kids or responding to situations, flip it and say, okay, if I'd have to be proactive, how can I do this? What can I ask my kids to do? What can I bribe them with, so to speak, positive reinforcement in the beginning? Yeah. It's much more complicated for split parents. That's a very good point. Hopefully, let's pick this up. It's 9:30. Let's pick this up. Maybe tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more about parenting, because this also plays into the world of culture, family culture. All right, let's continue this. Have an incredible day. Thanks so much for tuning into the Daily Q&A. And with God's help, I cannot wait to see you again tomorrow.